In a 2-week span, I played 2 games that heavily feature a flashlight. Alan Wake and Doom 3. Let's break up my scattered thoughts with wipes reminiscent of the Black Lodge's floor. Let's roll. I initially downloaded the BFG edition of Doom 3 and uninstalled it as soon as it sent me off on its journey. I wanted the true Doom 3 experience, and the BFG edition isn't it. In the BFG edition, the flashlight is bolted somewhere on the player character's body. I wanted to hold the damned flashlight. I wanted the interesting choice Doom 3 has players making between visibility and being armed. I wanted the tension of spotting an enemy in the shadows and switching to a weapon and firing into that darkness, hoping the bullets were hitting their mark. BFG edition, why would you remove Doom 3's most interesting feature? Alan Wake is a third-person shooter with horror elements bolted onto it. It's not a good third-person shooter. It's a narrative walkabout with aiming. Aiming is barely a factor. The guns are superfluous to the third-person shooting. The player points in the direction of an enemy to weaken it. Flashlight or gun, it's functionally the same. It's redundant to point in the direction of the enemy with one thing to debilitate it and then have to point at it with another thing afterwards. I would have found Alan Wake more enjoyable if it simplified itself and stripped itself of the guns and purely ran with a light play. It would have been a more focused experience, and it could have focused more on tension and atmosphere than shallow shooting scenarios. So they took the run-and-gun franchise and made it into this slow, plodding corridor experience. System Shock 2 is great, it's scary and thrilling, but Doom should stay Doom. Doom is fast-paced, mile-a-minute shooting. It shouldn't try to be whatever Doom 3 is being. The slower movement speed, the unsatisfying feedback when firing weapons into enemies, the corridor after corridor after corridor. I don't like it and I don't want it. If a developer is going to make that many deviations from the IP they're working on, just make a new IP. Don't convolute or water down an IP that has already been established as being a particular product. Alan Wake, why do you withhold your most interesting bits to the extra chapters? Alan stood on a cliff shooting at a tornado, then it ended. But wait, there's more! I spent the majority of the game bored, treading through the same scenarios in the same environments using the same solutions to the same problems the game throws at the player with no developments in the play experience. And then I played the 2 DLC chapters, The Signal and The Writer. Luckily, the 2 add-ons were packaged with the PC version because I definitely would not have picked them up based on my time with the main game. It's not until the DLC chapters that the game capitalizes on the flashlight and how it interacts with the world and what occupies it, and capitalizes on the surreal potential of the world with the game's environment. The writer content especially. There's so much tedious running around in the woods and shooting goons in situations that lack gravity in the main experience. Why couldn't you cut some of that out and make the interesting bits part of the main game? Were you that strapped for cash that you need to charge people extra for your best bits? If you really want money, how about in-game ads instead of nickel and diming people for DLC? Jesus Christ. These product placements really take you out of it. They work in a racing game or a sports game. You know, the content matches the form by having advertisements in those worlds. But horror games hinge on atmosphere, and these fucking ads. These horror games, they tackle horror in an unsatisfying way. Jump scares and cheap tension by way of obfuscating player knowledge with its dark nooks and crannies, and the copious amounts of monster closets and enemies appearing behind the player out of nowhere. Those methods don't produce scares, they just startle. And they happen at a pace that desensitizes the player to the startles, and the upcoming startles become easy to read and predict, which leads to player boredom. There's a third flashlight game I want to talk about. Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon. It's a narrative walkabout action RPG where the player controls Seto, a boy exploring Tokyo after most, if not all, of humanity has disappeared. The player uses the Wii remote to control where Seto looks, which mirrors the flashlight he's holding. It does environmental storytelling and audio logs exceptionally well. I will neither confirm nor deny that I shed a tear or two during the course of Fragile Dreams. The wrap-up: both Alan Wake and Doom 3 do interesting things, but the annoyances shroud both games in a darkness that swallows up all light.
I got good news. That game you will is going to come back in style.